This message is brought to you by DoNotAge.org, the longevity research organisation that's on a mission to extend health span for as many people as possible via products that actually work. Start your journey today at DoNotAge.org and use code LLAMA for a 10% discount. That's LLAMA.
If I have the 3 to 5 people I spend the most time with, people who support me, who challenge me, who are great role models, and if I have wellness practices in mind, body, finance, and spirit, then I'm going to actually live a really good life, and I'm going to be well equipped to deal with the ups and downs that life inevitably will bring us.
Hello again and welcome to the Live Long and Master Aging podcast. I'm Peter Bowes. This is where we explore the science and stories behind human longevity. Now, mental health is something that many of us take for granted. When we think about living long and healthy, it's the physical aspect of human longevity that we tend to focus on. But for many people, depression can be every bit as debilitating as diseases linked to the effects of a bad diet or a lack of exercise. Indeed, these factors also play an important role in our mental health, along with many other factors. And depression can affect anyone, from high-profile athletes to veterans returning from war zones to a member of the family that you would never think of as struggling with his or her mental health. Well, I'm joined by Josh Goldberg, who is the Executive Director of the Boulder Crest Institute, which is a privately funded wellness centre for veterans with mental health issues. Josh, welcome to the Llama Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Boulder Crest, I want to talk about you and your journey to this point in your life, but tell me a little bit more about Boulder Crest.
Sure. So Boulder Crest was started in September 2013 with a retreat facility in Virginia called Boulder Crest Retreat, Virginia. And after operating there for a couple of years, it became very clear that the innovation that we were engaged in, specifically related to topics like PTSD and anxiety and depression for not just combat veterans, but their family members, needed to be expanded. And so last year, we opened up Boulder Crest Retreat in Arizona as well. And in January, we launched the Boulder Crest Institute for Post-Traumatic Growth to really bring what we've learned and what we understand to the wider world. And one of the things that Ken Falk, who's our founder, and I kept noticing is that every time we went to a meeting to raise awareness, raise funds, civilians would grab us on the arm and they would say, can I talk to you for a minute in private? And they would start to unload some of these deeper memories they had, deeper struggles that they had, and asked if we could do something for them or some member in their family. And so Ken and I set about last year to write a book, which is called Struggle Well, coming out in May, to address as best we could, without kind of being there with folks, what we've learned and how people can implement it in their own life. Because it's a topic we care deeply about, is kind of human suffering and struggle that doesn't have to exist the way it does.
Yeah, it is a huge issue, and the facilities that exist and things are improving, they really only touch the surface, don't they, in terms of helping people?
They do, and they focus so much on what I would call coping with the diminished version of yourself or your symptoms. And so they try to help you feel less bad, but don't enable you to actually understand how to take those struggles, which we know from like human history and from the Book of Job onward, that those struggles can actually create a life that's better. And I think that lack of focus and really just focusing on how to make people feel less uncomfortable really misses the point. And we see that with medication and the treatments we do. They're short duration and they're not sustained. And so you often leave people trapped in this version where their life feels like it's a fraction of what it used to be. And I'm firmly of the belief that, we have two needs as humans. One is to grow and the other is to contribute. And that we always have those needs, no matter what age we're at, that those are really important. And so part of what we hope to inject into the world and what Ken and I have devoted our life to is enabling people to find pathways to growth and contribution that allow them to feel like their life is worth living. Because while it's great to live a long life, it's more important to live a meaningful one.
Well, exactly. And mental health is pivotal to that. And I refer to the fact that people, when we consider longevity and living long and well, you might think of your physical health, your ability to walk and to run or to work out or to play with your children. It's sometimes, or maybe oftentimes, it's the mental health side of things that gets ignored, because I think a lot of times people just don't understand it.
Absolutely. And I think that in my own personal journey, my own personal struggle, I had crippling stomach ailments for some period of time, and we went through all the physiological tests to determine what was wrong. And the truth is, it was all related to stress, anxiety, and depression. And so the impact of mental health challenges on our physical well-being is profound and is well known. And I think one of the things we have to do is really take a comprehensive look, because it's great to do exercise. It's great to engage your body. It's great to, as my dad would say, not wake up and feel your age is really the goal. And there's so much more in life that no matter what your situation is. And when we see folks who I just spent last week with Dave Riley, who's a quadruple amputee, right? He doesn't have the facilities that a lot of other people have, and he lives a very fulfilling life. And so the body isn't the only thing, and there's an expression that, we get attached to the light bulb, and what we should focus on is the light.
So tell me about your experiences, because you kind of referred to it there, that you have had your own issues and you have emerged, I think it's probably fair to say, a better person, a person who understands perhaps what your problems were. But let's go back to the beginning and explain what happened to you.
Sure. So I grew up as what I sometimes call an indoor Jew. So somebody who was trained to be smart, trained to use my mind, not so much be strong, but to accomplish, to achieve a profession. And I did that well, and I was successful in business. I graduated from college in 2001, and then I went to work at 2 multinational companies around the globe for the better part of 12 years. And in 2011, I started to feel quakes in my own life, and I started to reflect on what it was that I was doing. I was married at the time. I was living a life where what I was chasing was what I would call money, power, and respect. That's what my goal was in life.
And you worked in communications?
I worked in communications, advertising, and marketing at ExxonMobil and at British American Tobacco before that. And I started to reflect, and part of that reflection was just going and talking to people. So I probably met about 100 people and asked them how they got to where they were. And I heard the most amazing stories of people bumping their heads, taking curvy routes and finding a life that they were not just proud of, but that they felt inspired to live. And I knew that I wanted that, but I didn't know how to get it. And so over the course of about a year, I really started to deconstruct my life. I got divorced, which is obviously incredibly painful, and I didn't have kids, which made it a little easier. I switched careers, I changed hobbies, I changed friends, and I began to try to resurrect a life that made sense to me and that was attuned to what was true for me. Because like I said, I felt like I was living a Truman Show existence. Like someone said, here's your life, live it, don't complain, just figure it out. And
The Truman Show being the Jim Carrey movie of this guy living in a clinical kind of world.
Yep, and he's the only real person. Everyone else is an actor. And it just felt very disingenuous. And so there was a lot that was liberating about that experience. And there was also incredible fear. And I was terrified because I didn't know how to get to where I wanted to go. And I didn't know who could help me get there. And I worked for a guy at that time named Mort. And Mort had lost his son to I don't know if it was suicide or drug or alcohol, but at my age. And he looked at me and he said, you're not doing okay. And he said, and that's okay. And I shared a copy of a book called Man's Search for Meaning with me, which is very pivotal, by Viktor Frankl. And because at this time I'm suicidal, I got panic attacks, I have severe anxiety and depression. And side note, you wouldn't really know that when I was at work, right? I was high functioning in spite of all of that.
You were able to compartmentalize things in your life, your issues, your personal issues, and your professional life?
I was a professional at wearing the mask, and I was a professional at pretending. And I'd done it for so long that I didn't really know any other way. I went to 2 therapists. I was given medication for anxiety and depression and sleep. And I just found that I felt like I was kind of trapped and was stuck. And I did have a lot of moments when I thought it might be better to start over, whatever that meant, than it would be to try to figure it out. Because I was losing patience with my ability to figure things out. And
Did you have any ideas? Did you, at the back of your mind, think you knew what the problem was? Or were you simply totally confused by this avalanche of issues that you were facing?
I had no idea. I mean, the way I would describe it, I felt like I was in an impenetrable fog. And I had no idea which way to walk. And I don't have a sense of direction to begin with. So I literally had no idea which way to go. And I would try different things, but the things that are so available to us when we struggle, drugs, alcohol, sex, violence, all of these things that are so almost socially acceptable ways of dealing with our pain and agony, and those were the things that I turned to. And I found them lacking. Like you'd feel good for a minute, and then the next day when you're hungover, it loses its luster. And in the process of all of this, I had one inclination, and the inclination was that maybe my life would be better if it wasn't so selfish, if I actually looked to serve somebody else. And a week later, I was in Los Angeles, and I was sitting at a table with my brother and a friend of his, And she worked with athletes and celebrities to see how she could help support their philanthropic goals. And she asked me when I got back to Dallas if I would meet with a client who was on the Cowboys and his wife who had lost her brother in Afghanistan. And I said, of course. And so the next week I met with them for lunch, and they started to share their story and what they wanted to do in terms of helping veterans and leveraging sports to do so. And I said, I don't know anything about this. I've grown up, both my grandfathers were stateside during World War II. I have no connection to the military. I don't understand the issues, but I want to understand them. And they gave me like tons of reading to do. So I started reading, and what I circled around was this topic of PTSD and anxiety and depression. And I would read suicide notes. I remember there's a New York Times article with some of the excerpts from those notes, and I was like, I could have written that, right? I actually directly connected to that. And as fate has it, it was when one door opens, more open. And so I ended up, meeting people on planes and having conversations. And it just happened to be that every person I met that was new was interested in veterans stuff.
And was this the first time, in a sense, that the light bulb had gone on for you and that you thought, well, I'm not alone. I can understand. I feel the same way as people are writing about themselves, and that there are other people in my position? Absolutely.
It was certainly the first time I felt like there was a universality to what I was experiencing, and it was the first time in a sustained way I think I felt like there was a flame burning that was directed at something, and I just kept following it, and I found myself standing in front of a man named Dusty, who's 6'4", 250. He's 64 years old, and Dusty was a 82nd Airborne guy, and I call him a modern day Spartan, just a huge man with a white goatee. And we were talking, and he asked me why I had come to this program that I was at. And I said, I came to help and I came to observe a program that combat veterans were going to go through. And Dusty looked at me after we talked for a while, and he said, you seem like a really well-meaning young man. There's a lot of people who want to help who are really after something else. He said, this seems genuine. He said, but you're going to do one thing first before you help anybody else. And he used more salty language, but let's just say he leaned into my face and said, "You're gonna fix yourself first." And I said, "How do I do that?" And he said, "You be quiet and listen to what I say." And
did he say that without you telling him what your problems were? Had he figured it out?
Yeah. And that's part of the intuitive and empathetic nature of combat veterans and folks with military experiences, that they are the best people readers you've ever met. And their BS detector is very significant. And so he knew that I was lost. And he also saw in me something good, right? It wasn't just that he was concerned about my well-being. He also thought like, okay, this guy is here for the right reasons. He's just lost. And so I had the opportunity to learn wellness practices and to be able to understand how it was that I created a life that felt so disingenuous. And I think most importantly to me, I never felt like I was part of anything. So I grew up, like I said, as a Jewish kid, but I was never connected to that community. I went to college and had a small group of friends, but didn't really fit in with any group of people. I always found myself kind of the person who could navigate any group of people, but who wasn't really a part of any of those. And when I found my way into this world of the military and veteran community, it was real brotherhood. It was real commitment. It was real integrity. It was when someone said they had your back, they meant it. And so for me, I think the story that gets told of people go to war and come home and they're messed up, that we failed to understand just how profound the experience of the military is, and not just training people in how to be really effective at doing things under duress, but actually in how to be really, really good human beings, and what it means at the level of the intangibles of character-based attributes that they bring to the table. And that's what they've taught me. They've taught me in the course of working with them over the last 4 years how to be a man, how to be a leader, how to be kind, how to be a servant, how to be humble, how to work together with other people to pursue a common goal. And that's the part for me that drives me is I know that in our work, and the reason we focus on combat veterans is we believe that not only are they different, we believe that their experience in hell, if you will, on earth, it actually gives them wisdom that the rest of us desperately need.
So from that point, that this guy who you'd never met before came very close to your face and said, you're going to sort yourself out first. What did you do next?
I listened. I actually closed my mouth and I listened. And ironically, because I love to talk, and not long after that, I would come to meet Ken Falk, who had started Boulder Crest in Virginia, which was the first wellness facility that was privately funded, focused on combat veterans and their families. And when I met Ken, I had laryngitis, and I couldn't talk, and so I had to listen. And he talked for a while, And I got to listen and I got to learn. And subsequent to that, we ended up getting together in Virginia, and we probably spent, I think it was like 8 hours together. We had 3 Tic Tacs, 2 glasses of water, and 1 bathroom break, and just laid out what we believed, which is, in the world of nonprofits, it's a fulfilling and wonderful thing to be able to change one life. That's cool to get to do. But what Ken and I were after, and what we viewed these issues of anxiety, depression, mental health writ large, were issues that were systemic, and that there was a solution that wasn't being considered. And we're both contrarians. We don't believe in like conventional wisdom. We kind of have to figure out stuff for ourselves. And that's what we kind of agreed. It was the day after Christmas in 2013, was like, there's a way to solve these problems in a meaningful way. And in many ways, it starts with training people to be able to understand how to take the worst times that we have in our life and use them to create strength and growth and possibility. And that's Ken's story. Lost his mom when he was 7. It's my story in a very different way. Ken was disarming bombs and doing crazy things, jumping out of planes, diving under the deepest seas. And I was just trying to figure it out in corporate America. And ironically, what's amazing and beautiful about it is, that connection that occurs at where our life is most universal is in the space where we struggle. That's the most human that we are, is when we struggle. And so whatever your age is, whatever your situation is, I think there are some universal truths that can guide the journey from what we would say is from struggle to strength, whether that's deep struggle, whether it's temporary, whatever the issue is how do you actually take advantage of that and use it to teach you lessons that you can continue to grow and learn from. And I've been fortunate in my life to have incredible mentors, including my grandmother, who we lost last year at 102, who remind me that you never get to stop growing, and more importantly, you never get to stop making choices. You're never stuck if you don't want to be.
And we'll continue this conversation in just a moment.
Hey, quick question for you. Are you someone who wants to be fit, healthy, and happy? And what if I told you could get your dream body by simply just listening to a podcast? I'm Josh.
And I'm KG, and we are the hosts of the Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast.
Listen, we get it. Fitness isn't easy. Carbs, no carbs.
Just stop, okay? It doesn't have to be that complicated. And that's why we made this podcast. We get straight to the facts so you can become your best you.
So the way to check us out is click the link in the show notes or search Fit, Healthy, and Happy podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. We'll see you soon.
So, to what extent did you, from that point, focus only on yourself rather than embracing other people and trying to help others as you do now? How long was it just me, and what results did you see from that?
And it's a great question because, one of the things we like to think that there's 2 types of people in the world. There are people who are self-focused, and then there are people who are others-focused. And the issue we have with a lot of our veteran friends is they're others-focused, and they'll give you everything they have and end up with nothing because that's the way they are. And they lived in a world where someone else is going to do that for them. And I think for me, what I was able to do was I really took the time I needed to build the practices in my life. So, I wake up every morning and I meditate, I engage in physical activity or exercise of some kind. I tend to read or journal, and then I start my day. And so what I started to do is build a routine that worked for me and start to build a community. The other thing I've always been is incredibly curious, passionately curious. And so once I had my experience in this profound epiphany, which was like by the end of this week I had spent with these veterans, I was like, holy cow. Something was like, this is what you're supposed to do with your life. And I was like, whoa. Like, I don't know where it came from. That had never happened to me. But it was this clarity of like, this is what you're meant to do. Is I worked to reverse engineer my experience and my life and then to listen to other people and understand where those commonalities were. Because for me, being committed to solving these problems was we can't solve a problem we don't understand. And I think far too often when it comes to mental health, we're shooting at symptoms, but the symptoms are literally symptoms. There's a root cause that the symptoms emanate from, and we don't look at that. And so I really spent probably 6 months, and I was sleeping on couches and eating Kind bars that friends were giving me because I didn't have any money, to actually think and reflect and listen and understand, why is nature so powerful? Why does meditation so powerful? Why is it important we look at how we were raised and the impact that has on us, no matter how old we are or young, and all of those sorts of things. But every day started with like me time, and then whatever I needed to give to the world. And that for the past 4+ years has been a constant, is the first hour or 2 of my day is mine. And however early that means I have to get up to do the things I need to do to be the best version of myself, I then get to bring that to the world. And so it starts with me and then it goes into the world and into others. But I think that balance is critical because if you focus just on yourself, right? You can go into a cave and just do self-care stuff, but you miss out on the beauty of life, the connection, the opportunities. And then on the other hand, if you're just taking care of other people, we see it time and time again, diminishing returns. Even in the mental health world, we see it with what they call visceral trauma or secondary PTSD, is if you're not healthy and strong and you're sitting with people who are telling you really hard stuff, you're going to begin to diminish in your effectiveness. And that's true for us as friends, professionals. We have to have the keys to our own kingdom and know what is it I need in my life to be the person I want to be, and understand that at times, that I'm going to need to build a reservoir of strength that's going to be drawn upon in really hard times. And that's what I felt has worked for me. And I think I'd speak for Ken as well in saying it's worked for him too.
Let's just focus on that me time, because I know that'll resonate with a lot of people that listen to this podcast and are interested in lifestyles and managing our own daily lives, which are increasingly frenetic these days, just the life, the fast-moving life that we all, or lives that we all lead. How do you manage that me time and make sure that it always happens?
So meditation for me was one of the major things. And so I practice transcendental meditation, which is one of the forms of meditation, and it's 20 minutes twice a day. And so for me, wherever I am, so if I have a flight at 6 a.m. and I have to get up at 3 so I can make sure I can meditate and get to the airport on time, I'll do that. And so I think for me, it's making sure that I recognize the things that I need to do in my life and do them no matter what. And recently, so I've been traveling a lot because we opened our facility in Arizona, and I have a Peloton, a spin bike in my house. I have a gym next door, so it's very easy. But when I'm on the road, it's not. And so I talked to a friend who's a workout junkie, and he sent me 2 workouts that you can do in like the space of a closet, like in a hotel room. And so I started doing those as an example. So for me, it's about identifying, for us, the way we think about me is mind, body, and finance. Those are the 3 areas of life that seem to need to be right in order to allow you to make the maximum contribution in life. What I would call the how. Those are the how to being effective at life. And so when it comes to the mind, those are things like journaling, reading, spending quiet time, meditation, art, things along those lines. Then when you get to body, it's obviously moving. And I know you guys have talked a lot about that on the podcast, about the importance of just moving your body in different ways and whatever's feasible. And then the finance part's important because that's the part that tends to impact our stress levels the most. And we think of finance in 3 ways. It's how do you live, which is your quality of life. Where do you live? Just geography. I mean, there's seasonal affective disorder, all these things. And then there's how much do you have to live on? Have you created a life for yourself where you actually have the cash you need to know that that's not going to be a stressor? And those are the 3 areas for us where me time is meaningful. And then in the middle of our wellness triangle is the spirit, which we think of as relationships to others, from your spouse, significant other, children, all the way up to a higher power, if that's in your wheelhouse, to your character, and then your sense of service to others. And that's how we think about it. So for me, one of the things I struggled with, I didn't have a framework. Right? I was like, okay, I don't want to be this way. And so I had a guy who was like, hey, why don't you come take a spin class? And I was like, I don't want to do that, but everything I want to do is not working. So I'm going to do the things I don't want to do. So I went. And so, someone invited me into that world, which has become something I love now. And I think that to me, having a framework to understand, okay, if I have the 3 to 5 people I spend the most time with, are people who support me, who challenge me, who are great role models. And if I have wellness practices in mind, body, finance, and spirit, then I'm going to actually live a really good life, and I'm going to be well equipped to deal with the ups and downs that life inevitably will bring us in our situations. So
it's interesting how you describe the start of your day, because I know the excuse, if you want to call it that, for a lot of people of falling off the wagon, of not doing some of these things, is simply the things that they have to do during the day: catch the flight, catch the bus, catch the train for an early meeting. Oh, well, I'll just skip things that day. But you purposefully get up earlier, no matter what you're doing, to make sure that you can get these things in.
Absolutely. And there's a joke about a guy who learned meditation, goes to his meditation instructor, and he says, sir, I can't find the 40 minutes a day to meditate. And the instructor says, oh, for you must meditate for 1 hour. And so the idea is it's work smarter, not harder. And I think that is what I do. But, I was just talking to a buddy, because gratitude, having gratitude practices, literally waking up every morning and saying, this is what I'm grateful for. I have a buddy who does it in between reps at the gym. So there are ways to be creative. If you're taking the bus, or you're on a train, or you're using public transport, or you're going on a plane, you could meditate there, you could read there, you could write there. So I think to me, it's like reflecting on your life and saying, here are the 5 things that I'm not going to negotiate. These are going to be part of my life every day. And then figuring out creatively, which is the kind of fun part of problem solving, how do I inject these into my life? And, with the Institute opening in January, one of the things I asked for when I was talking to Ken is like, I have to have a meditation space in there. And for me, whether the people I work with who often will ask if they can learn meditation, it's meaningful to me that it's in there and it reminds me, and it's like twice a day I'm going to be in those chairs and I'm going to do what I need to do. And I think that's what I realized is if I start to compromise on the things that are most important to me, then everyone pays the price because I'm not who I need to be, for anyone.
Do you compromise on sleep?
I was told it's interesting because I was told that that's the one thing you should never compromise
Which,
on.
from what you said, I suspect perhaps you do early in the morning.
Occasionally, when I'm taking some of these crazy early flights, I might. I'd also say from my senior year of college for 10 years, I slept about an hour a night. I had massive, massive insomnia. And so the joy for me of like getting, and I'm not sure what my perfect sleep number is, 6 hours, 7 hours. It's a joy that I can actually go to sleep. And so I try to make sure I go to bed at the same time, 10:30, and then wake up around 5:36 every day. So I get a good amount of sleep. And then, if I get up early, then I'll just sleep on the plane or whatever it might be. But
and you're clearly sleeping a lot better now
yes.
than when you were having your problems.
Yeah. And that's like when we talk about like mental health, so you go into the doctor and you say, I'm not sleeping. And the doctor says, here's sleep pills. And it's like, well, that's odd, because it's like, why aren't you sleeping well? Because I happen to believe sleep is an outcome of wellness. And so, yes, you can have blackout curtains and take all this and have a ritual and not have a TV in your bedroom and yada, yada, yada. And if every time you lay down, the anxiety starts running, your eyes pop open, and all you're doing is worrying about tomorrow or what happened today, that's why you're not sleeping. It's not because you have light in your room. And I think that to me is like the missing part. And when I was we weren't yet in marital counseling to get divorced, but I remember going to a doctor, and I was concerned that my wife was depressed. So we talked about it, and how ironic, who was depressed? It was me. I was the person who was depressed. And I'm like, and this is the irony of the kind of situation we get into, which is like about digging deeper and having those conversations. And I think being astute and in tune with people like Dusty in that story is, now I can look at someone and be like, oh, that person's not doing okay. I can see, right? The eyes are the window of the soul. Something's going on, and I can go ask them, like, what's going on? How are you? What do you need? And I think that's what I was probably lacking, which is why this is so important to me, that whether it's the book we wrote, the work we do in Virginia and Arizona, is because I didn't have it. And it almost cost me my life. And so I want to make sure that I spend the rest of my life making sure other people have it, whether that's remotely in a book form or in person. I think that's what drives Ken and I, is like, how do we spread the word that when we go through difficult times, our life is not permanently diminished as a result. And that's what we believe as a society. There's no question in my mind about it.
And I think a big part of what you're saying is essentially being at peace with yourself. And it comes into you were talking about finances and getting things sorted there. So it just simply isn't preying on your mind, the problems that you potentially have because you haven't figured out your taxes or whatever the issue is, or maybe you need to speak to the manager at the bank, to just be at peace with your life. And if that means earning less and spending less, but being content with what you have, that all falls into the lifestyle and certainly sleeping well.
It does. And it's a reminder, we're constantly bombarded with imagery and things of like all the stuff we need that we don't have. And that sometimes those wants turns into needs. And I think that's absolutely right. And I think the other thing about all the work we've done, and this is what's so interesting when you look at, for us, the story of the prisoners who were at the Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam for 9 months to 10 years, Viktor Frankl, the consistent theme tends to be people who are imprisoned for kind of political crimes, if you will, is that what they report when they go through the struggle is that all of the stuff isn't actually that important. Yes, okay, granted, you need some money, you need to have a roof over your home and all the rest over your head, but the point is what we've learned from people who've struggled deeply and come out the other side is the things that matter are the quality and nature of our relationships, our sense and belief in ourselves, the sense of gratitude we have for small and big things, and really this idea about growth and contribution. So what post-traumatic growth is about, and why we kind of made sure we put that in the Institute's name, is it's about what actually matters. And I always think about this idea of pre-traumatic growth, which is what if you could learn this stuff before really bad things happen? And we've recently been talking to some folks about that idea because it's like, I had to learn the hard way, and I hope other people don't have to and go fall as far as I did about what actually matters in life. And it's not, the brand name on your sweater and the car you drive. You need a vehicle to get from point A to point B. And it's cool to have nice cars. Ken, we like nice cars, but the point is it's about your priorities. And that to me is the major function of times of struggle and difficulty and loss, is that it forces you to reevaluate your priorities about what matters. And that's clearly my story. And it's clearly the story of folks who are in the military. They have a different sense of value on the intangible versus the tangible.
You mentioned your grandmother got to, was it 102 years old? What did you learn from her?
My grandmother, and I say this, she died suddenly at 102. So 2 weeks before she passed, I was with her and I spent a couple of days with her. And she had just signed up, and we were debating which classes she was going to sign up for. And the year before she passed, she had just learned meditation. And I learned a lot from her. She taught me a couple of things, and one of the things I'm really proud about is being able to put that in the book is that she taught me that if you love what you do, you're going to get out of bed every morning and be excited to go do it. And she taught me that if you find the person you're meant to spend your life with, it's like a light bulb comes on every time they walk into a room. And she had these sayings, but what was more interesting is what was underneath that. And I recorded a conversation I had with her when she was about 98, 99. And my grandfather passed when she was 90, and they were together for 65 years. And I asked her about this idea of love, and she said, your grandfather was a wonderful man, a beautiful man, and when he died, I realized that I hadn't been that nice to him. And I resolved that the rest of my life I would be much nicer to people. And for the last 12 years of her life, she was a different person. And, had huge issues with my mom, just normal, like daughter-in-law stuff. No one's ever good enough for her son. And by middle of that period, my mom was calling her mom, which is improbable. And the relationship we had, when I struggled, the person I leaned on the most was my grandmother. And she was the one who would guide me. And so I think I saw a profound transformation at the age of 90 to 102 in somebody who became more open, and who was willing to learn things and to engage with life and engage with people in a completely different way. And that continues to boggle my mind. And I wanted one thing when I went to Cleveland after she passed away, and what I wanted was the sign-up sheet from the classes. And I found it, and burst into tears because this is hard. And I found it, and I'm going to frame it. And for the rest of my life, that's my reminder that you live until you don't. And she lived, and then one day she didn't. And I think that's my hope. And I know, whether it's dementia or cognitive issues or other things that come with age and physical ailments and things like that. She suffered from the physical ones, but not the cognitive ones. But I think that's what she taught me. She taught me that, and she taught me that it's not the number of years you live, but the quality of the time you have. And I think arguably for her, the last 12 years were more meaningful than the prior 90. And that's amazing too, is this idea that you never reach a point where you don't have the opportunity to change. And Benjamin Button, which is that movie where it kind of goes in reverse, there's a quote from that movie when he says, "You're never too old, you're never too old or too young to change." So that's what she taught. She taught me a lot. She taught me a lot, and I'm and on the one hand I miss her, and on the other hand I just close my eyes and I can hear her, and I recorded her talking about stuff, which is a wonderful thing as well, to have that wisdom for life. So.
Well, that's the way to go, isn't it? 102 years old after living a fulfilling, meaningful life. I mean, that is, if you wanted to encapsulate what this podcast is all about, it is living a long, healthy, fruitful, purposeful life. And then hopefully, and I say that honestly, hopefully dying actually quite quickly at a great age.
Yeah, I mean, and it's exactly, and it's ideal. And people, when she passed, and it was, the rabbi was wonderful because he said, people are going to say things that seem insensitive, like, she lived so long and all the rest of it. And I'm like, this is pretty fresh. And that's why I made a point when I did the eulogy, and I was like, my grandmother died suddenly at 102. She was almost 103. And I think that, to your point, would be ideal. And the flip side of that, which I understand the podcast is designed to be about a long life. I would like to live a long life. I feel good about my genes. I have a fighting chance. My grandmother's great-grandmother lived to 110, which in the old country, which is pretty amazing.
You do have the genes then.
Yeah. So I just don't want to screw them up. But Martin Luther King said not long before he was assassinated, because I think he had a sense of what was happening, that he would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but he wasn't worried about that now, and that he had been to the mountaintop. And I think that the hope is in life we have these peak experiences, we have these moments, we have this sense of aliveness. And I see it. My father's 70 years old. It's my grandmother's son, and he works full time. He's up at 4 o'clock in the morning, exercises for 2 hours. Like I joke, my dad's going to be like 125. Like we're gonna have some problems. But I think that's my hope for folks, is that
And
the
yourself.
opportunity, and myself, and the opportunity to live meaningfully, however long, because that's the one thing we're not promised. We can take care of ourselves and things still happen, and I think all you can ask for is that you really had the opportunity to figure out what was meaningful. And the other thing that was striking, I met with a person recently who had done some work in hospice centers, and they ask you some pretty profound questions in a hospice center about if you lived your life's purpose, if you found fulfillment, and these sorts of things. And I thought, well, that's sad, right? I mean, like, what are you going to do when you're in the hospice center if the answer is I don't know or no? And so to me, when I especially when we're talking to folks who are struggling at whatever age, it's like today is the moment to start to explore the answer to those questions, because when all is said and done, those are the ones that will determine the impact you had on others and the life you lived and your sense of contentment with life. And I think that's the other part of what we've tried to do when we write the book and ask these questions. It's like, if you can figure those out, no matter what age you are, it's like, okay, I had the chance to live a meaningful life, and I figured it out. At least the best of my abilities, I figured it out.
I suppose if there is something I'm striving for, is that people can figure it out at an earlier age. And I'm curious as to whether your grandmother, who you say kind of figured it out in the last 10 years, to some extent, in terms of how she dealt with people, did she ever express a wish that she had figured it out earlier in life?
She did, and I think that was implicit in that relationship with my grandfather was really profound to her. So they founded a chain of supermarkets back in the day. They worked 16 to 18 hours every day together, side by side. And I think what I heard in that was a regret that she hadn't been kinder, perhaps, and more supportive to him. And I think that was one piece. The other piece is my grandfather said, and told her, never look back. And that was the other thing she talked about. And I think, I'm of two minds, because one of the things in the book we talk about is, what we know from a physiological health and a mental health perspective is a lot of the seeds for struggle are planted when we're children. And that makes sense because we're very, very easy to influence and trainable at that age. And that's what we see with a lot of the combat veterans, is that when we talk about where the struggle is, you assume the battlefield. It's not true. What we see is it's before folks join the military. So I don't want to go whole hog on the don't ever look back, because I think it's important to understand our origins. And at the same time, I'm not sure regrets do that well. But the part that she could be proud of is she lived long enough to build those relationships meaningfully with my mom, with my brother and I, with my cousins, that she had the chance had spent so long focused on the professional side of things that she got to be warm and softer and more vulnerable, I think, with the people she really cared about, which is what I think the last chapter of her life was about.
And I think looking back has a value in terms of learning from mistakes. I think you ignore those at your peril, because if you don't take heed, maybe you just continue making the same mistakes.
And there's the sort of philosophical or spiritual idea that you'll get the same test until you pass it. And so if you don't look back, if you're not reflective, if you're not introspective, then you're going to keep finding yourself dealing with the same type of personality or the same type of challenge. It just, life has a way of working itself out that way, that you need to be a learning machine, like a growing machine. And I think that's what you would ask if my dad, when he did the eulogy for my grandmother, he had offered kind of these four epochs, or the four eras of her life, and that through each of them there was growth and there was change and there was evolution, up until the last one, when it really became about relationships and connection and legacy. And she was fortunate enough to have that longevity. When we're not all guaranteed it, the question is, why wait, right? There's no time like the present. There's I paraphrase a quote from a movie. It's like, when you know how you want to spend the rest of your life, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. And I think that would be my hope. Is, I'm almost 40, so I feel blessed in some ways that I know what I'm going to do the rest of my life, more or less. And I feel like the Institute is the platform to do that. And I'm okay with that. You kind of always wish it was younger, but I'm not sure I could have had the maturity to do that. But I do think that there's no time like the present to start to be reflective and considering how you grow and evolve into the person that you're supposed to be. And I don't know that we ever finish that journey. It gets interrupted at some point by something that we're not in charge of. So.
Yeah, exactly. As I say, stuff happens, and we learn to deal with it. But you strike me as being in a very good place now.
Yeah, I had a moment in 2012 at Thanksgiving when we did a normal family tradition of going around the table and sharing what you're grateful for. And it was the day before I was moving out of my home, and 3 weeks before the divorce was final. And I passed. I had my best friend and his wife and their little boy flew in from England. My brother and his wife were there. My parents were there. There was food. It was a beautiful home. And I had nothing. I couldn't see anything. And I wake up every morning, and wherever I am in the world or country, and I think, I can't believe I get to wake up again. I can't believe I get to do this. And gratitude kind of pours out of me, as does passion. And I think for me, this has been the greatest blessing of my life. And so, like, to say that, and we still experience things. We still experience loss and struggle. A very close friend of mine's son took his life at 17. And I think the thing I can say there is, at least I can be of value. At least I can offer something to him to be able to deal with that in some meaningful way. And I think that's been the amazing part of my life, is actually figuring out how much strength I possessed and seeing what's possible when I unlock my talents in a way where they're targeted at something I feel really purposeful about. Life is. I know they have those sort of sarcastic shirts that say "living the dream." But that's true. Like wherever I am is exactly where I want to be. And I just got done with a program with 4 veterans and 2 spouses in Arizona. I'll be flying back tonight, and tomorrow morning at 8:00 I'll be with 8 folks who are from Texas and Florida, who are veterans, who are going to be delivering our program in Texas and Florida. So it's like, this is just, it feels like, I don't know if it's a yellow brick road, but it's like a beautiful path.
It is a beautiful path, and it's been a real pleasure to meet you and to hear your story. If anyone listening wants to find out more about your work and perhaps get involved with what you do, what should they do?
So I would say 2 things. So our book called Struggle Well, Thriving the Aftermath of Trauma comes out on May 1st. You can pre-order it on the Kindle now on Amazon, and then it'll be live on May 1st. And the second is Boulder, Boulder, Crest Retreat. BoulderCrestRetreat.org is our website. If you want to learn more about what we're up to, support our efforts and work with combat veterans and their families and first responders, we would love it. And my wish for everybody is to have the opportunity to not just live long, but live well and live meaningfully. And remember that the most important things in life are the ones you can't see.
Totally agree. Josh Gelberg, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And those details that you mentioned, I will put them into the show notes for this episode, and you'll find those at the Live Long and Master Aging website, lamapodcast.com. That's LLAMA podcast.com. The site is constantly evolving. There's new information there. There's a complete back catalogue of our interviews. And as I often say, if you're listening on a platform where you can leave a review, like Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, 5-star review will be hugely appreciated. If you think we deserve it, it helps us to grow the podcast and to secure its future. Many thanks for listening. Health optimization is what this podcast is all about, and that means taking care of our mitochondria, the energy centers of our cells. Physical strength, avoiding frailty, is key, and that's why the science behind urolithin A and the work of Timeline Nutrition is so interesting. You can find out more and get a discount code at our website and in the show notes for this episode.